the cold grey skies above the Baltic Sea, a single Swedish fighter jet was about to rewrite the rules of modern air combat. The JAS-39 Gripen, sleek, fast, and underestimated by many, had just pulled off a move so precise, so unexpected, that it sent shockwaves from Stockholm all the way to the Pentagon's war rooms. This was not a test. This was not a drill. This was real. It started like any other routine NATO exercise. Multiple Allied aircraft in formation, practicing intercept maneuvers, radar tracking, and combat simulations. The United States had its most advanced stealth fighter, the F-35 Lightning II, in the air. Russia's radar systems were watching from afar. And in the middle of all this, the Gripen, a fighter often dismissed as budget compared to America's multi-million-dollar jets. But within seconds, everything changed. During a mock intercept, the Gripen pilot executed what's known in aviation circles as a snap lock, a lightning-fast radar and missile targeting sequence that can catch even stealth aircraft off guard. In under 3 seconds, the F-35's onboard systems registered a lock warning. The Pentagon's pride, the aircraft built to be virtually untouchable, had just been caught in the crosshairs of a jet costing less than 1/3 of its price. On paper, this shouldn't have happened. The F-35's stealth design is supposed to reduce radar detection to near zero. But the Gripen's advanced AESA radar, combined with electronic warfare systems and the pilot's split-second decision-making, exploited a momentary weakness in the F-35's flight profile. It wasn't just skill, it was technology, timing, and tactics all working together in perfect harmony. The other pilots didn't even realize what had happened until the exercise was over. The Gripen's pilot stayed calm, breaking formation and fading into the clouds as though nothing unusual had happened. But the debrief room told a different story. The data showed it clearly. A perfect targeting solution against one of the most sophisticated war machines on Earth. Within hours, reports reached US military analysts. At first, some dismissed it as a fluke, but further review of the radar data confirmed the truth. This wasn't luck. It was a calculated move that revealed a vulnerability no one expected. And if a Gripen could do this in a controlled exercise, what could it do in a real battlefield scenario against an unprepared opponent? And if a Gripen could do this in a controlled exercise, what could it do in a real battlefield scenario against an unprepared opponent? That question was now echoing through the Pentagon's halls, through classified briefing rooms, and across the desks of top US defense contractors. The Gripen had not just embarrassed the F-35 in front of Allied pilots, it had exposed a potential weakness that America's rivals would be eager to exploit. For decades, the United States had dominated the skies, confident that its stealth fighters could evade detection and neutralize threats before being seen. Yet here was a smaller, cheaper aircraft built in Sweden, a country with a fraction of America's defense budget, showing that raw innovation and adaptability could rival sheer spending power. The Gripen's design philosophy was simple but brilliant: agility over brute force, electronics over sheer size, and adaptability over expensive complexity. The incident forced US analysts to re-examine the very foundation of stealth warfare. If advanced radar systems like the Gripen's could detect and track stealth aircraft under certain conditions, then the entire strategy of air superiority might need to change. Some quietly feared that the event was a warning. That future conflicts would no longer be won simply by having the most expensive jet in the sky. Meanwhile, in Sweden, the story was being told behind closed doors. Saab engineers and military officials knew they had proven something significant. They also knew that such a capability, if widely publicized, could make the Gripen even more attractive to foreign buyers. In a market dominated by the F-35, this single demonstration had just positioned the Swedish jet as a serious alternative for nations seeking top-tier performance without paying billions. But the Pentagon wasn't taking this lightly. Sources suggest that within days of the incident, US specialists began running simulations to replicate the Gripen's maneuver. They wanted to know if this was a rare set of perfect conditions or a repeatable, teachable tactic. If the latter was true, every enemy with advanced radar technology could potentially exploit the same vulnerability. The idea that a jet costing under $70 million could consistently outmaneuver a $100+ million stealth fighter was unthinkable. And yet the data didn't lie. Behind closed doors, military strategists debated possible countermeasures. Should they update the F-35's software, modify its flight tactics, develop new jamming systems? Every option came with a price tag, and every delay increased the risk that this information could spread beyond allied nations. And somewhere in the skies, that same Gripen pilot, the one who made the move that shook the world, continued flying, training, and perfecting the art of turning stealth into a target. The skies had changed forever, and the Pentagon knew it. They weren't just reacting to a single incident anymore. They were preparing for a future where the hunter could become the hunted in the blink of an eye. They weren't just reacting to a single incident anymore. They were preparing for a future where the hunter could become the hunted in the blink of an eye. And that thought terrified military planners more than they were willing to admit. Inside the Pentagon, teams of engineers, tacticians, and intelligence officers began dissecting every frame of radar data from the exercise. They slowed it down, frame by frame, analyzing the exact moment the Gripen's sensors locked onto the F-35. What they saw was sobering. The Swedish jet had used a combination of advanced radar modes and electronic countermeasures, techniques specifically designed to bypass stealth advantages. The move wasn't reckless, it was calculated to the millisecond. In classified war games, Pentagon analysts started simulating scenarios where the Gripen's tactic was used not by an ally, but by an adversary. In these simulations, stealth aircraft, from F-35s to B-2 bombers, were suddenly at risk of being tracked and targeted before they could strike. The results sent shivers through the defense community. For decades, the mantra had been simple. If they can't see you, they can't hit you. But now the Gripen had proven there was a way to see the unseen. The political ripple effects were just as severe. NATO allies who had already ordered the F-35 began quietly asking questions. Could their multi-billion-dollar investment be compromised? Defense ministries in Europe and Asia started requesting more detailed reports on the exercise, while some even contacted Sweden directly, curious about the exact specifications of the Gripen's radar and electronic warfare suite. Officially, Sweden kept quiet, offering only vague statements about successful interoperability during training. Unofficially, whispers spread fast. The Gripen had pulled off something extraordinary. Meanwhile, Saab, the manufacturer of the Gripen, found itself at a crossroads. They could capitalize on the buzz, pushing the Gripen as the cost-effective fighter that could challenge even the world's most advanced jets. Or they could remain discreet, avoiding public confrontation with the US, while letting the incident speak for itself in defense circles. Either way, the Gripen's reputation had skyrocketed overnight. But the most alarming realization for US officials came from a deeper analysis. The tactic the Gripen used didn't rely on some secret Swedish-only technology. In fact, with the right modifications, other nations could replicate the maneuver. Countries like China or Russia, both of whom have been investing heavily in radar and electronic warfare, could adapt similar methods to threaten American air dominance. If that happened, every stealth mission, from reconnaissance flights to deep strike operations, would be at risk. Behind the scenes, high-level meetings between US and NATO commanders grew tense. Some argued for immediate upgrades to the F-35's radar-absorbing coatings and software. Others pushed for entirely new tactics, avoiding flight patterns that could be exploited. But everyone agreed on one thing. The Gripen had changed the conversation. It wasn't just about who had the best fighter jet anymore. It was about who could adapt fastest. And as the sun set over the Baltic Sea weeks later, the same Gripen pilot took to the skies again. This time, there were no exercises, no simulated battles. Just a lone fighter cutting through the clouds. Somewhere, thousands of miles away, in the heart of the Pentagon, analysts were still staring at the data from that day, still trying to answer the question that refused to go away. If the Gripen could do this once, what else could it do that no one had seen coming? The answer, they feared, might only reveal itself when it was far too late.